Okay, so welcome everyone for distribution demo meeting on 21st January 2021. Uh, I'm essentially gonna use this demo time to discuss on one strategy to implement automatic auth integration with our charts. So this is required to enable uh, integrate using GitLab as a identity provider or auth provider for different apps that we ship, like GitLab pages for access control or Grafana for GitLab SSO and MethodMost for GitLab SSO. Uh, they, in a nutshell, the problem is uh, we need GitLab to be up and running for us to register an application as an OAuth application. Uh, at the same time, we need these credentials to be present in the service, whether it be GitLab pages or Mattermost or Grafana. We need these credentials to be present in their configuration. So right now, we don't have a way to intervene between uh, the Rails pod spinning up and other service pod spinning up. So we cannot, like, after the Rails pods have spin up, create this application, then put those values in configuration file, then spin up the service pods. We don't have such an option right now. So we need some way to uh, inject these variables somewhere during the runtime and ensure the applications pick up these changes. So uh, mm, I tried something and it seems to work. I have linked it in the demo notes. It's charts MR1782. Uh, Essentially, what it does is we tap to our existing system of where we run database migrations when we spin up a cluster, and we at the end of that migrations job we kind of register every application listed in the values file as OAuth applications directly hitting the Rails console. So uh, this has two parts. One in CNG where we need a new script which will essentially do this, like run certain commands in Rails context, and we need the chart side to create the secrets, put all of them in the right place, and do everything else. So the CNG side essentially is we assume there are secrets present in a directory. We traverse through that directory and pick each one of them, run a Rails command to register them as OAuth applications, and we do this in an idempotent way so that doing it repeatedly will not change anything. And on the chart side, we provide everything that this script needs. We create the secrets, we mount them in the expected directories in the expected directory structure, and then we rely on whatever we have been using for migrations or that setup that we already have. So let me share my screen. Okay. Uh, this is essentially the CNG script. We actually tap to the DB migrate script. We already have some custom instance setup kind of thing where we enable a feature flag automatically during startup. So similar to that, we are running a new script with the GitLab Rails runner command so that it can access every Rails context. And the script essentially does traverse through a directory and read the secret or everything. Each of them are stored as files. We read them and we run the doorkeeper command. So this command is what we use in Omnibus GitLab to implement this feature. We directly hit the doorkeeper gem or use the doorkeeper gem to create an OAuth application. uh, what I realized today is we can provide UID and secret, and we can choose not to ask doorkeeper to create them. This means the job of creating the secrets can be delegated to someone else. In our case, we already have a generate secrets job which does this, so we can make that job create the secrets and pass them on to doorkeeper. So right now this script is, well, 3 minutes of thought. So it it doesn't have any guardrails or anything. It expects everything to be in place, but we need to add guardrails and everything there. But it's essentially the logic is that much. And in the chart side, uh, okay, we in the migrations job spec. Okay, before that, in the generate secrets, we create the necessary secrets. So for auth applications, we technically need three details. One is a application ID, one is a secret name, and the other one is the redirect URL, where after authentication it should redirect to. The secret contains both application ID and application secret, and we create it. It's a uh, it can be anything. We go with the convention of a 32 character alphanumeric string. So secrets generation will create that. We will mount them in the migration job spec so that it matches whatever that script is expecting. So uh, we mount it to slash etc GitLab or secrets pages app ID app secret, and then the redirect URL need not be a secret. We can compute that. So we put that in a config map and mount that also. So these three things, the script will read app ID, app secret, and redirect URI, and it will use those details to create the doorkeeper application. So this is the premise. There are few things we need to discuss and decide. One is where should these settings be placed so that if users want, they can override them. Like they can not depend on our generate secrets, but provide their own secrets. And two, how can we hook these to other applications, Mattermost and Grafana, which we are using the upstream charts, and we currently do not have the flexibility of uh, using templates or anything like that to compute all the information we need. So in the MR, I kind of went with a global setting called GitLab auth, to which we can append pages, Mattermost, Grafana, all those things. But one problem is uh, Mattermost has its own settings structure for this. Like it uses config.json.gitlab settings for this. So if we are using GitLab auth dot Mattermost, how will we how can we pass the values that users set here to where Mattermost expects them? Similarly for Grafana, so that is one thing that I couldn't find an answer to, following a uh, global way or general way of doing this. Like if we have to consolidate everything to one way of doing it, I couldn't figure out how to pass information in one JSON structure that we use to the JSON structure upstream charts use. Uh, Next one is our shared secrets job can only use globals right now. We have an issue open for moving into the root chart, so it can use any subcharts values. Uh, then the question becomes: should we wait for that, or should we go ahead with using it globals now? And when we eventually move shared secrets job to the root chart, we can do any cleanup or refactor we want. So these are essentially my questions. But I'm happy to hear if anyone has any concerns regarding the method or comments.
Yeah, I think the moving it into the migrations job seems like a logical place to me. I think on the CNG side, it would be ideal if we were able to reuse the custom instance runner, and specifically the custom instances like Rails environment, so it doesn't have to take that extra time to boot up the environment. But that's the only call out I have on that side, at least.
So once we open up the Rails context, let's reuse that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Basically,
makes sense.
if we can use that same, yeah, if we can get our this script also into the same script that the Rails runner is using in the custom instance setup, then we would shave off 10 to 30 seconds,
Makes
which
sense.
is extra important because this is going to run every single time the migrations job run, even if there was no migration. So every time you do a helm install
Yeah.
or a helm upgrade.
Right. There's that. Um, the other question is, yes, that is the right place we would put it in the current formats. If we have this kind of behavior in two projects, should it be in the rake code base versus in Omnibus and in the charts?
So I thought of that. One of the problem is it creates two sources of truth for applications. It can already be done via the UI. If we add some sort of okay, here is a list of applications. Do this also. We will go to the problem of like what we have with initial root password. Uh, we can't do that because we want this to be applicable everywhere, not just the first run or before the database is seeded, because users can choose to flip access control anytime, or we will be adding a second way of setting things like not just on the first database seed, but always look at this file or this location to automatically register applications. So uh, generally, I am not a fan of two sources of truth for one thing. It in my mind it should be either UI or programmatically. So that was my concern for not recommending changing anything in the Rails side.
Okay. Um, I see where you're coming from. I would point out that that is exactly what we're doing by putting this script in place, though. Um, the script is not limited specifically to the grafana that we distribute or the pages that we distribute. It is set up currently in such a way that it will just read that directory and then take every one of them and then go do the registration for that. In theory, what happens if somebody alters that registration? Say somebody goes in the UI and changes the app secret, and then
We
migration's
can't.
job comes around, or even somebody just runs db migrate or runs custom instance setup script and triggers that and then reruns this job basically. Will that overwrite
Okay.
things, or will it behave in such a way that if the database already has the entry, don't touch it?
Uh, so right now, if some you cannot change the secrets directly from UI, you have to be in the console to do those. Even then, I'm not sure if it takes an update or just you can delete and recreate. But the first or create method essentially checks for whether an entry already exists with these settings. If not, create them. So what we can do is essentially split this into two. First, check for an entry with this redirect URI and this name. If not, go and create that. That will be an additional check because uh, maybe not all four of them will match if someone has changed something somehow. But yeah, uh, we can ensure almost idempotency here. Uh, my main concern is essentially this. For pages, we control everything. We can tell it to fetch things from a template or compute it whatever way we want. But other apps have their own way of doing this. We How do we hook up our convention with theirs? We can always do this per chart or per service instead of going with this uniform approach. But I wanted to exhaust all possible ways of doing this uniformly before we go that way.
Yeah, so for the other charts where we've had to do this, which is things like the Postgres chart, um, basically we've had to request changes of the upstream charts to actually like typically we haven't had them change their values. What we've had them do is instead of rendering like the grafana.ini.auth.gitlab directly into their config map, we have them do it via a
Template,
template.
so we can override.
And that, yeah, and then as soon as they do it via a template, yeah, we can override the template to introduce our own logic.
Yeah.
But that is not the case. I just checked, and it doesn't appear that that's the case currently with the Grafana chart.
Grafana is doing it like they have a grafana.ini key and they render everything to their config back. They don't differentiate anything there. So
Yeah.
if we ask them to change it, it will not be a simpler thing for them to do. They
Well, so it looks like they loop through. They do a range loop
Yeah.
there. So possibly we could get them in like an extras param, and the extras param uses a template potentially
Right.
That-
And we also
at the end of
have
their
the
range.
option of actually reaching out to another provider that we use, Bitnami, and asking for their input on how they're dealing with some of these things, if they're dealing with some of these things. So while the Grafana upstream, Grafana is where we should look first, we do have the option of considering actually doing something different. If it's truly problematic enough, we can go to the point of considering forking. But I say that with a lot of weight behind it, considering forking, because we need to have a good reason to not be following upstream. I'm not against forking for short periods. Do the things, prove them out, get upstream to adopt them if possible, and then unfork. So now DJ did mention, and I'm seeing this in the link that I provided, is they do have a way to basically provide it via configuration and then have it populate in. The problem is the extra secrets mount and how that functionality actually works.
Oh yeah.
Depending on how that works, it's not something you can actually template. There are some implementations that actually allow you to basically include a template into your values, and then it will render the template into that section. It's a very touchy behavior that's super easy for people to break.
The Grafana one, Gerard, maybe you remember. Did we encounter something like this? Did we get around it by basically creating our own config map? Obviously, this doesn't solve the mounting problem, but did we for Grafana? Aren't we already creating our own config map and just pointing Grafana at it, so we're not actually using theirs for this?
My memory's fuzzy on that right now. I don't remember creating a separate config map for.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how we already wired it up to like our Prometheus.
Yeah, we used
we did that for dashboards, right?
We use
Well-
the GitLab Grafana chart to render several a data source config map
Yeah, I got
and a secret import.
Yeah, so shouldn't the same sort of thing work in this case then as well? We'd be able to do something like that.
We may be able to. We'll just have to look into what is actually required to do that in order to get this kind of behavior to function. So we'll see. It's definitely going to take a little more look into things. And we do need to reach out to see what's up with Mattermost. It's still a scenario right now where we don't include Mattermost. We don't currently plan to include Mattermost. And we need to see the state of their chart.
Question. If we don't do any of those, should we be thinking of providing out of the box OAuth for Mattermost? Because Mattermost is not coming out of the box. Why should OAuth be?
Right.
Was part of the issue for this creating OAuth for Mattermost?
There is no.
No, it's just larger figuring out how to do OAuth registration because we need it for pages security, and we need to do that to be able to directly link OAuth for Grafana through the GitLab instance.
Yeah, so on the Mattermost side, as long as we can we just, being that we're not including it directly, people have to install it separately. We should just have them a way that they can provide it both to Mattermost, and then they also have to duplicate that work and provide it to us as well.
Right. Like I said, we just need to look into it. I'm not as concerned about making sure we have that in play and entirely viable here. Our biggest concerns are pages and Grafana.
Yeah.
So if we could get Grafana to support something like extra grafana.ini, like for some way for us to provide this thing, technically that might solve it for Grafana and pages, but the problem is the next step may have something entirely different. So I'm not sure how much work it is to maintain this uniform way of doing things whenever we add a new application to the mix.
Well, we don't necessarily have to have it be perfect behind the scenes. And I mean, if that were the case, then these charts wouldn't be this complicated. What we need to do is to have a clean interface for the user to be able to actually configure these things, a known state of what will happen for those things that don't already exist, and configure whatever is required to get the application behind it to actually do its job. Like the current state of how we're configuring Grafana to consume the Prometheus as deployed with the dashboards little that we have, it's not perfect, but we've made it work in such a way that we don't actually have to alter the upstream chart in order to get that to function. We control GitLab pages. We can do whatever we need to get that to work, but that is honestly designed to be a very straightforward chart. It's just the application, and there should be very little, if anything, we have to configure to it besides, here are your secrets. Read this file, read this file, read this file. in theory, Grafana, we need to get it to that same point of here's your secrets, read this file, read this file, read this file. How we manage to get from this is the configuration map to, sorry, not the configuration map, these are the configuration properties, and this is the end result. Everything in between is a certain amount of flexible. Every OAuth needs the app secret, and the URI. I mean, there's
Yeah.
3 basic components that are needed there.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, uh, okay, that I'll look a bit deeper into it. But are we fine with the general idea of hooking this up to the migration script or that part of the life cycle?
So I'm generally okay with that. Um, when using shared secrets, that will function fine. What we have to watch out for is, one, we have to clearly document this. 2, this is something, because we're putting it into GitLab Rails, it ends up being usable by migrations and task runner and web service and Sidekick. So in the event that somebody has migrations turned off, then we need to document how to run this script by hand or trigger this script by hand from the task runner pod without the use of the DB migrate script. Because they may not want to be running migrations from inside the cluster. So we still have to make it included, idempotent, but individual.
Okay, fair enough.
I am happy to see overall, though, that we can actually just preemptively go, oh, the database is far enough up for Rails to access it. Ka-thunk.
Yeah, I didn't expect Doorkeeper to accept the password and secret, like ID and secret. I thought it had to be created by its own, but no.
Right. That would make certain people I know in the infrastructure as code block happy, because you can just read all the secret from the file and ensure it's in place. So that works out well for us, thankfully.
Okay, we are at the out of time. So essentially, my next steps will be to think more about how to hook this up with Grafana and essentially how can we do this with minimal changes both on our side and upstream side, uh, and then cleaning up the script and all everything I have in this MR. I have to clean it up and ensure I cover all the edge cases. Does that sound good?
Yep. Sounds good to me. I expect this will take probably the better part of a week to get through everything and the amount of items that'll have to be touched for it. So don't think that we expect this late tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, let me stop sharing. Cool. Okay. I believe that's it, and we can wind up the meeting unless anyone has any more questions or comments. Cool.
I don't think
Thanks
so.
everyone for joining. See you later.